Bonjour à tous, c'est Pascal de Neutrality Studies.
Hello everyone, this is Pascal from Neutrality Studies. Today, in French, I have the great honor of speaking with Dr. Ziad Medoukh, a French professor, writer, and Palestinian poet, currently residing in the city of Gaza. He is therefore speaking to us directly from Gaza. Holding a PhD in language sciences from the University of Paris, Professor Medoukh is head of the French department at Al-Aqsa University in Gaza, and also coordinates the Peace Center at the same university.
Professor Medoukh, hello. Hello, Pascal, and hello to everyone listening to your channel.
So thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today, because what is happening in Gaza is absolutely catastrophic. And then what we see from here, it's hard to imagine what's happening now for people who are still there, like you. Gaza is currently the most bombed place in the world. What is your personal situation, and how are you managing to survive amid the destruction that we only see through our screens?
First of all, let me say hello and thank you for the invitation. We can say that the current situation in the Gaza Strip is marked by 5 very important elements. First, the ongoing intensive bombings day and night. The second aspect is the massive destruction of an entire region. We can say that 85% of the Gaza Strip is destroyed. Civilian infrastructure, schools, universities, water wells, businesses, mosques, churches, and residential areas. The third element is the shortage of medicine, shortage of food, shortage of drinking water, shortage of gas, shortage of everything in the Gaza Strip. The fourth element is the famine that is setting in, especially in the north of the Gaza Strip, in Gaza City, where I live. The trucks aren't getting through. Even airdrops by parachute are ineffective because the supplies either fall into the sea, onto rooftops, or on people's heads, and so the quantity is insufficient. The fifth element is the lack of perspective. This has been going on for more than 22 months, and every time the Palestinians, with their hope, say that tomorrow it will end, tomorrow there will be a truce, tomorrow there will be a ceasefire. But for now, it's bombs and the daily suffering of an entire civilian population. For me personally, as a Palestinian citizen, as a French teacher, as a member of civil society, I am, like all Palestinians in Gaza, one of the 2.4 million Palestinians. It's daily suffering. So for me, life is very difficult. Between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., we have very tough tasks. In the morning, we first look for drinking water. After that, we try to find food in vain because there's nothing in the market. Either the prices are unthinkable or they're very expensive. Then, we go look for firewood because gas is forbidden. In the afternoon, we go charge our phones in places with solar panels because there's no power plant. It was destroyed. There's no network, there's nothing. So electricity has become a rare currency. So we look for places where there are solar panels to charge our phones, our lamps. That's it. So daily life is very difficult. As for me personally, I try to be active in civil society. I try to organize activities for children and young people. It's difficult in our situation. We try to help a little. For members of civil society, I try to help the elderly, women, but it's complicated because family and social solidarity, which used to be a strong point in Gaza, has become minimal because there's nothing, everything is unavailable, everything is expensive. So daily life is very difficult, marked by pain, misfortune, and suffering.
You are a professor at the university in Gaza. Does the university still exist? Do you still have students?
Listen, I am a French professor at 2 universities, Al-Aqsa University and Gaza University. At Al-Aqsa University, I created the French department, and at Gaza University, I established the French Language Center. Unfortunately, both universities have been destroyed, including the French department and the French language centers. However, we are holding virtual classes. We are trying to teach a bit virtually. For the students, though, it's not always easy because they don't have internet access and there's no electricity. Sometimes, they are forced to go to places where there is electricity or internet. It's not always easy. We can say that about 85% of students are currently attending classes. It's difficult to meet with young people, with students, because there is nowhere to go. There are no NGOs, no cafes, no restaurants. But we try to keep in touch with these students, with these young people. We try to support them, to lift their spirits, to give them hope in this situation of total disaster.
Israel always tells us that the reason they had to destroy civilian infrastructure, like your two universities, is because it was being used by Hamas as a military site. Have you ever encountered any Hamas personnel in your universities?
Listen, personally, I'm not interested in the political sphere. I care about the civilian population. The civilian population is suffering. There is destruction, not just of my two universities, but 85% of civilian infrastructure has been destroyed. Mosques, churches, schools, universities, water wells, homes, neighborhoods. So everything is destroyed, everything is devastated in Gaza. There's always an excuse to destroy, to assassinate, to kill, to massacre, to crush. We are a university, a place for exchange, a place of freedom, a place of democratization, because it's the only place where young people meet, not just for classes, but for training, for exchanges, for workshops. And by the way, at my university in Larsa, I created the Peace Center to promote democracy, women's rights, and freedom of expression. That's number one. And at the university in Gaza, I created the French Language Center, and we organized many exchanges with universities in France, Quebec, and Belgium. So this shows that there is a reality on the ground, that we are working, that we are preparing for a future of peace. And so the occupation always finds a pretext to crush, to destroy. We are still here. It's a miracle to be alive, but we continue our mission. We have a mission that is far from political parties, far from the intervention of states or the government. It is to try to support young people, to try to develop democracy within Palestinian society, to promote the principles of tolerance, freedom of expression, women's rights, children's rights, and above all, to prepare a future for peace. Personally, I am in favor of nonviolent struggle. I'm a Palestinian pacifist. I'm for peace, for the future. I continue my mission despite the destruction of my home, despite the devastation of my neighborhood, despite the loss of many members of my family and much of my property. I am forcibly displaced, but I try to continue my noble mission, which is to prepare for the future. For us, the future is peace and justice.
Rebonjour à tous, on est de retour. On a eu une...
Hello again, everyone. We're back. We had a brief interruption in our connection, but now we're once again with Professor Ziad Medoukh. Ziad, tell me, in Europe and America, and even in Japan, there is still a debate about whether the destruction and deaths caused by Israel among the civilian population of Gaza should be called genocide or not. What do you think? In your opinion, what are the right words to describe what is happening in Gaza?
Les mots justes pour décrire ce qui arrive à Gaza.
To answer your question, I, as a Palestinian from Gaza, live under the bombs. I suffer every day. I am living through absolute horror. So I'm not going to use those words myself. I leave it to international organizations to bear witness. Because if I use a certain word, they'll say, well, of course, Palestinians use that word, that concept, or that expression. So I prefer that international organizations, international ministries, and the UN use those words, because they are on the ground. They have delegations. But personally, I can't use those words. Even though we are experiencing more than absolute horror, we are living through a catastrophic situation. That's why I let the organizations use those words.
C'est pour cela, moi, je laisse les organisations utiliser ces mots.
D'accord. Et puis, quelle est la situation
All right. And then, what is the current food situation? Are the residents able to receive any basic necessities? And where are the supplies you have now coming from?
D'où est-ce qu'ils vont maintenant, les provisions que vous avez?
Écoutez, dans la ville de Gaza où j'habite,
In parts of Gaza City, or never in the north of the Gaza Strip, nothing gets through, unfortunately. That's why food products are nowhere to be found and prices are unimaginable. On the other hand, there are those convoys of trucks that pass through the south of the Gaza Strip. That's why over there, well, also, in the south, which is in the center of the Gaza Strip, the occupation has created 2 aid distribution centers. So people go there, even if they risk being killed and greeted by drones, by snipers.
par des drones, par des snipers, mais il y a depuis le 27 juillet.
But since May 27th, there have been more than 300 Palestinian deaths. Teams went to seek humanitarian aid. Then there are the airdrops, meaning military planes from a few countries, France, Italy, Spain, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Egypt, that are there. It's to drop food aid, but it's not enough. It's a foolish solution. The food supplies either fall into the sea, onto rooftops, or on people's heads. There have been 29 deaths in 3 days. So, this shows that it's an ineffective solution.
Donc, ça montre que c'est une solution inefficace. Le plus important, c'est mettre la pression sur l'occupation.
The most important thing is to put pressure on the occupation so that it opens all the crossings to allow humanitarian aid, which is stored and damaged at the borders, to enter the Gaza Strip, where the needs of 2.4 million Palestinians suffering from hunger and malnutrition must be met. I remind you that as of today, August 5th, 2025, there have been 138 Palestinian deaths from malnutrition and starvation, including 95 children under the age of 14. That means there are women, elderly people, and young people who have died as a result of malnutrition and starvation.
Suite à la malnutrition, suite à la famine.
Est-ce que selon vous,
In your opinion, should it be the UN distributing the aid, or is there a solution for distributing aid without involving Israel?
Sans Israël pour une distribution de l'aide?
Écoutez, pendant la trêve.
Listen, during the 2-month truce between January 19th, 2025 and March 2nd, 2025, until all the crossings were closed, there were the United Nations, international organizations, and 7 international organizations were established. There was the Family Reunion Program, there was ANERA, there was Saudi International, so there were these organizations, in addition to the UN, distributing humanitarian aid in the warehouses, sending SMS messages to people, and we would go to the warehouses freely to collect and retrieve humanitarian aid without any problem. And so it was the same everywhere in the Gaza Strip, in the north, and in Gaza City. Right now, either the trucks are being stolen by starving people or by armed gangs, or the distribution centers are at risk. They're a deadly trap. I think the UN has a responsibility. The occupation needs to open the crossings. The UN should play its role again, meaning it should receive the aid shipments at the borders, store them in warehouses, and then send messages to needy families so they can collect the food packages with dignity. That way, food products will be available to the people. It's not like it is today. Today, a kilo of flour in Gaza City can cost up to 65 euros and a kilo of sugar up to 130 euros. So this is unprecedented. These are unimaginable prices. But unfortunately, there are merchants, there are war profiteers, but above all, there is a shortage. There are proteins that are impossible to find in Gaza City. That's why the prices are unimaginable and people are unable to feed their families because of these prices. But sometimes there is no other choice. You have to feed the children and buy the surprise, even if it's unimaginable.
Oui, vous le dites, on n'a pas de choix.
Yes, that's what you're saying. We have no choice. I've received questions from my friends. Why isn't it possible for outside aid? You receive aid from outside, but so far the situation is that Israel blocks everything that could enter Gaza, or it's Israel that has the final say on what gets in, right? There is no other source for you, for the people in Gaza, to receive aid unless Israel opens the checkpoints.
Bien sûr, c'est l'occupation. Donc, l'occupation.
Of course, it's the occupation. The occupation is the one that controls the crossings. There are 5 crossings connecting Israel and the Gaza Strip, and it's the occupation that controls them. Everything goes through the occupation. Countries and international organizations send aid to the borders, the aid arrives at the crossings, but to actually get the aid in, it's blocked by the occupation. So that's the number one point. Even people and organizations that want to help, that want to send aid directly, money, everything is blocked because the Rafah crossing has been closed since November 27, 2023. So financial agencies take 50% and merchants absorb the rest. Today, if you send 1,000 euros to Gaza, the value of 1,000 euros today is not like before. It's not even like 100 euros. That means that 90% of the value, if you send 1,000 euros, there's a value in euros. But 1,000 euros in Gaza today is only worth 100 euros. That means 50% goes to financial agencies because we don't have cash, or channels, or banks. So the little money in the hands of these financial agents, these money changers, they take a 50% commission. And on top of that, with the unthinkable prices at which they sell food products, they absorb 30 to 40%. So if you pay 100 euros, no, we'll only receive 10 euros. We'll use 2 euros for that. Everything is blocked. And this is the daily suffering of the population, especially in Gaza City and in the north of the Gaza Strip.
In your opinion, for people in Europe and America who want to help you, what is the best option? Donating money to one of the foundations or to international organizations that can really help you there, in Gaza? Is there even a choice?
Listen, international organizations are blocked. They can't get food products in. Even if at some point authorizations are granted, the goods get stolen. And even if they make it to the warehouses of international organizations, those organizations say it's not enough. They keep it for their own storage. At night, there are armed groups or hungry people who attack the warehouses and steal the goods. So this makes the situation much more complicated. The occupation needs to allow between 500 and 600 trucks a day enter so the population can feed itself. That's number one. Number two, for people, it's hard to make this choice. What's the point? Because there are a lot of people who offer help. But if they're going to send us, as I just said, 1,000 euros, we'll only receive 100. I'd rather people wait or get involved in solidarity. For me, that means sharing information, buying books, signing petitions, taking part in protests and gatherings while we wait for a solution. For me, a reasonable perspective is that this money is wasted. It's money thrown away because we'd rather suffer than waste the money of those who are in solidarity, of well-intentioned people who are very eager to send help, but unfortunately, they don't know the reality. Me, as a third-party observer, I try to talk about what I see, what I write, even if the impact isn't huge. And even the local organizations, they've tried for years. They've contacted the associations, the activists who claim to help the Palestinians, but maybe not. These activists and these organizations, they're there for their own clientele. That means if you don't know people over there, they can't provide you with food. Well, that's the reality. I can't generalize. That's why I thank the people who want to come today. I'm waiting for the opportunity to get a car, but for now, it's not worth sending anything, because everything is blocked at the moment.
rien parce que tout est bloqué pour le moment.
La seule solution, selon moi, c'est de trouver
The only solution, in my opinion, is to find a political solution. The catastrophe in Gaza is an entirely political catastrophe. What do you think is the solution for the future of Gaza, for a Palestinian state, alongside an Israeli state? Is that something you can imagine? What political path could we take to have a future?
Écoutez, nous sommes convaincus qu'il y aura
Listen, we are convinced that there will never be a military solution to this conflict. The only solution is a political one. That's the first point. So the political solution comes down to three parts. First, the creation of a free and independent Palestinian state, and Gaza is an integral part of this future state. There must be geographical continuity between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. The second very important aspect is the urgent holding of elections in Palestine. Up until now, for 25 years, there have been no elections, and this has led to a division among Palestinians. There's a government in Gaza, a government in the West Bank. There's division, and we see that the population is left to fend for itself, not just by the occupation, not just by the international community, but also by the Palestinians themselves, the political parties, the authorities, the government in Gaza. They haven't lived up to expectations. It's the merchants, our own people, who set the prices, who run the Gaza Strip. So our criticisms are clear. They're the ones who decide. They're the ones who steal and resell at extremely high prices. So holding elections is urgent. And the third aspect is to restart the peace process beyond failure. The only solution is peace and the application of international law, and above all, justice in the country. That is the only solution. But violence and military actions will never bring results. And we have seen the consequences for almost 23 months. The war has devastated. There are 60,000 dead, more than 100,000 wounded, as I mentioned, 15,000 missing, and above all, it's the lack of respect. To restart the peace process, there will never be another solution. The only solution is peace, but peace with justice.
Est-ce que vous voyez
Do you think a ceasefire should be established first, by Hamas or by the Israeli side? Do you see a concrete path toward ending the violence?
selon un fin de la violence?
Listen, the only solution is the international community. Unfortunately, the international community is not playing its role. Since October 7th until today, the international community has not shown its effectiveness. The international community denounces, it condemns, it makes decisions. But the Palestinians in Gaza are waiting for something concrete. What does concrete mean? It means applying international law. The Palestinians today are not asking for the moon. The Palestinians are asking for the application of international law. Yes, we support a ceasefire. We support the release of the hostages. We support an end to this tragedy. We support peace. All right, but if the international community stays like this, it means it is complicit, silent, and things are not moving forward. Pressure must be put on the occupation. The crossings must be opened. International aid must be delivered urgently. And above all, the peace process must be restarted. The peace process is currently a complete failure. The occupation has taken advantage of this to accelerate settlement building, to occupy the Gaza Strip, to expand the Gaza Strip, to assassinate dozens of civilians and Palestinians. The time has come to establish peace. The time has come to stop the violence. The time has come to think about the next generation. As I just said, there will never be a military solution. We need to give young people a voice. We need to organize elections, give them the opportunity to express themselves, to give hope to this new generation. That's why we are not only calling for a truce or a ceasefire, But above all, we are demanding a political solution. That is, an end to the occupation, an end to colonization, the creation of a free and independent Palestinian state, and above all, the establishment of peace with justice in this region that has suffered so much and paid such a high price for. To reach this situation, in my opinion, time is passing very quickly, and day after day, new sanctions are being imposed. So the time has come to stop this tragedy. I work a lot with young people, with children, and I see that every time we organize activities for children, with young people, every time I see children attending the educational center, every time I see students taking virtual classes, they become less violent. That is to say, I try, along with my colleagues from civil society, to give them hope. They need to be supported. When we meet with people, with young people and children, they become less violent. But if we leave young people, if we abandon them, that's why I personally decided to get involved, because I am a role model for these young people, for these children. That's why I hope there will be a political solution. The problem is that every time violent struggle is proposed, peaceful options are proposed, and the occupation comes and crushes everything. In my opinion, we need to restore hope to this generation. We need to speed up and revive opportunities to save future generations. That's the only solution. I am convinced of that. I am proud to have stayed in Gaza. I am proud of my peaceful choice. I am proud to choose education as a form of resistance. I am proud to choose resilience as a form of resistance. I will continue my fight. It's not always easy. I will continue my fight until there is peace and peace with justice.
What we're hearing from Israel are a lot of very harsh words regarding the current plans for Gaza. A Gaza without Palestinians. A Gaza that is completely conquered, not just occupied as it is now, but occupied by Israeli soldiers everywhere in the Gaza Strip. Do you think that's... How is it possible for the people of Gaza to have a future under occupation? What do you think of Israel's plan for a total occupation of your Gaza?
Une occupation totale de votre Gaza.
I would like to tell you about a very important aspect. From October 7th until today, it's been almost 9 months. 9 months of absolute horror. 9 months of hell. 9 months of assault on the country. 9 months of relentless bombings. 9 months of massive deprivation, famine, and death for everyone. But also 9 months of resilience. It's true, the losses are enormous. Deaths, injuries, massive destruction, families, the collapse of the healthcare system, but the population is still there. Let me give you a figure that will shed some light. Only 100,000 Palestinians have been able to leave the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing. That is to say, before, there were 2.5 million of us. Now 2.5 million. Only 100,000 Palestinians have gone to Egypt or to countries in Latin America or Europe to study or work. So despite everything, there are 2.4 million who are still here. They suffer every day, they risk their lives, but they have decided to stay. As for the plans, they have resisted. We are still here, surviving, because there is no real life, just daily survival, with very difficult daily tasks, with an abnormal life, abnormal survival. But we are still here. This is our land. We're not leaving, no matter what. Personally, I have many friends who told me, "Come to my place, we'll introduce you to politics." Today I can come early, but for classes, lectures, conferences, to present my collections of poems and tickets for my first university job for 3 or 4 months. But I would never ask for asylum out of fairness. And for a simple reason, because I have a life called Palestine and a life called Gaza. I am very attached to Gaza. It's true, Gaza today is a field of ruins. Gaza is devastated. Gaza is destroyed. Gaza has been wiped off the map.
effacé de la carte, mais je préfère rester ici à
But
l'est.
I prefer to stay here, in Gaza. That has always been my choice. You see, so that's it. Regarding the economy, whether regional or international, let's remember Trump's plan to make the Palestinians leave Gaza, and on a large scale. I think this new plan will fail, because here there is willpower, there is determination, and I think the only goal for a long time of the occupation, through these aggressions, these offensives, is to make the Palestinians leave. But the Palestinians are still here. Why does the occupation launch offensives, aggressions, every 3 or 4 years? Because the Palestinians, despite the blockade, despite the economic difficulties, are still here.
Les Palestiniens, malgré le blocus, les difficultés économiques, ils sont toujours là. L'objectif, c'est briser la
The goal is to break the will of these civilian populations, but they are still there. So, all the plans fail, because here, there is a population. Here, let's make a comparison between 1948, that very year, and now. In 1948, our grandparents and parents were forced to leave the territories of 1948. They came to the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Gaza. After that, they went to Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and Jordan to live in camps, and then they went all over the world. Now, there are 9 million Palestinians abroad. And these Palestinians, they need to one day return to their land. But today, in 1948, there were massacres. So they are involved in the Arab stereotype. And today, there is more than just a massacre, but the Palestinians are still there. There is an awakening. That is the Palestinian strength. Aside from the presidency, they have understood that they need to stay. Even if they lose their lives, even if they die, even if they suffer, they are still there. They are there. To answer your question directly, all regional or international plans will fail as long as the Palestinians are still there, still holding on. And above all, there is hope for the future.
C'est incroyable pour moi, mais
It's incredible to me, but you have all my sympathy. And then where does this resilience come from? The suffering is immense right now. Also, that's what we see from here, the images we see from here. Where does your resilience come from as a people to not leave, literally, to not leave Gaza?
De ne quitter pas, littéralement, ne quittez pas la Gaza.
Listen, I invite you to read and use my books that were published during the aggression. I have 3 books that came out during the aggression, or before. I will answer you by talking about my personal case. My personal case, I want to expand it to the entire Palestinian people. I have 3 things that force me to stay, that force me to be resilient. First, the principles of nonviolence. Being nonviolent does not mean being weak. On the contrary, it means being strong. So, my convictions, my principles, my choice of nonviolent struggle forced me to stay in our apartment, to stay close to the people, to give them hope, to remain attached to the land. This is what peaceful struggle is. This is what nonviolent struggle is. Developing actions for the good of children, encouraging people to attend universities, and even, yes, encouraging students to go to centers, because there are no classes elsewhere. Number 2 is solidarity, international solidarity. Every day I see, through photos, protests, gatherings, not only in French-speaking countries, in Palestine and in France, but all over the world. In Japan, in Australia, in the United States, everywhere in the world, there are demonstrations. And so this solidarity soothes my anger. Personally, I have a network of French-speaking friends who send me dozens, even hundreds of messages of support every day. And these messages of support bring me relief. They calm my anger. Because we, the Palestinians, have lost everything. We have lost our land, our livelihoods, our homes. We have 2 things left: our attachment to our land, and above all, international solidarity. Because we have been abandoned by the official international community, by the state, by the elite. These people need to take a stand in solidarity. Associations and organizations support the Palestinian cause as a cause of justice. And in fact, This solidarity shows that the Palestinian cause is a universal cause. It is not a cause linked only to Palestinians.
C'est une cause universelle. C'est pas une cause liée aux Palestiniens. C'est pas une cause arabe. C'est pas une cause musulmane.
This is not an Arab cause. This is not an Israeli cause. Humanity, this concerns humanity because here there is oppression. Here there is injustice. The people who march, who gather, who sign petitions, who write to the media, they don't support Ziad Medoukh because he is Palestinian, because he is a Palestinian from Gaza. No, it's because he is a humanist, because he is another human being. So the Palestinian cause is an international cause. It is a cause of justice. It is not reserved for Palestinians, nor for Muslims, nor for Arabs.
Ni aux musulmans, ni aux arabes. Et donc ça calme maintenant.
And so that calms my madness, and above all, encourages me to keep resisting in times of war. The third aspect, and this is personal to me, is the French language. As a Palestinian, as a French teacher, the French language has become not only a language of hope for me, a language of peace, as I wrote in a European book, but above all, a language of protection. Because I write, I bear witness, I express myself in French. I renew through my testimonies, through interviews with the media, with websites, with newspapers, with all the associations. And so, the French language has become a source of protection for me. Because I think in French, I write in French, I reason in French. And so this language has helped me to have a purpose, to receive this considerable number of opinions of messages that bring me support and calm my anger. So the French language has become a source of protection for me. And these are the three elements, the three reasons. International solidarity, but also in Italy, in the Pacific, yes, and in the French language. And because one source may have died, that encourages me, despite the questions about living conditions, which themselves are appalling. Even if I write pages, books, I could never write or recount the reality. The reality on the ground is much harsher. You might say that from abroad you see photos, videos, but that's nothing compared to what's actually happening. It's not just rhymes, it's reality, it's harshness. So in truth, it's total suffering every day. And despite all that, we're all still here. And me, I'm talking about myself, but this goes for all the Palestinians in Gaza who have chosen to stay in the hell that's happening in Gaza. I have hope. I have hope that Palestinians are living today.
It's incredible what you are all doing together as a people right now. But tell me, to wrap up this interview, is there anything else you would like to say to everyone outside Gaza who is listening to you in French, English, or German? Is there anything else people should know about what is happening in Gaza right now that we haven't talked about yet?
Listen, I have 3 messages to address to your channel. So thank you, Pascal, for this interview. As I just said, every time I testify, I calm myself down. Because if you're in Gaza, you feel like exploding. Because on the ground, there's violence, death, destruction, famine. Everything is complicated. Everything is appalling. So, my first message is that I want to thank all those showing solidarity around the world for their support, for their commitment, for their mobilization. I think those showing solidarity must continue this action, and bravo to them. This solidarity matters to us because many supporters, many friends have told me they feel powerless. We want to help you, but no, on the contrary, you are not powerless. You are strong. I think there is a very important aspect. Recognition and change, even in speeches, not in the actions of many countries, are linked to this mobilization, to these demonstrations. Because when European presidents say they will recognize a Palestinian state in September, they have no support for implementation, and that is thanks to this mobilization. So, we have a role to play in this mobilization. Number 2, there are Palestinians in Gaza who will never leave Gaza. So we are always here. Here, our party, we will continue our commitment. And above all, I ask the whole world not to chase after propaganda, especially the official media that repeat the propaganda of the occupation. There is a harsh reality. If you seek information, you need to try to get it from reliable sources, meaning Palestinians who live there. Fortunately, there are Palestinians who speak English, French, Spanish, German, Japanese, and Chinese. So that's an advantage, because culture and education are very high in Palestine, especially in the Gaza Strip. We need to try to get in touch.
Il faut essayer d'entrer en contact. Ça veut dire les jeunes avec les jeunes, les médecins avec les médecins.
That means young people with young people, doctors with doctors, journalists with journalists, women with women, students with students, to understand the reality. Because what you see in the media, on websites, in photos, in breaking news, in videos, that's nothing compared to the reality. Reality is what we understand from reality itself. You have to reach out to Palestinians who speak several languages to understand what's really happening. On one hand, you'll be expressing your solidarity, but above all, you'll get real testimonies about what's actually going on. Even if it's hard to describe or to tell, at least you need to have sources, real Palestinians, like today. So I'm trying to be objective in this interview. I'm trying to show reality in an objective way. And so those are my three main messages. And thank you again, Pascal, for this interview. I hope it will be broadcast, that it will be listened to, that it will get feedback, because that's the goal, to try to show reality, to deconstruct our prejudices, to share our daily lives, but above all, to tell the whole world that we are a people who love peace, who love justice, who love hope, and we are a people who deserve life like everyone else.
Merci pour ces mots très très forts, Professeur Ziad.
Thank you for those very, very powerful words, Professor Ziad Medoukh. We will share your message across all our channels.
Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, bon après-midi. Au revoir, Pascal.
Au revoir.
Good afternoon. Goodbye, Pascal.
Goodbye, Pascal. Thank you. See you next time. Thank you.
Merci.